Please go
Okay,
ahead and
thanks.
get started.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second Young Architect Workshop. The central theme of this workshop, I'm sure you already know, is to serve as a welcoming venue for junior graduate students and to help them navigate their path through grad school. So on that note, our panel today has three established architects from both industry and academia. And they are all here to give you some awesome advice about how you can go out there and make your PhD a grand success. I'm your panel moderator for today. My name is Akshitha Sriraman. I'm a PhD student at the University of Michigan. All right, so without further ado, let me begin by introducing our three amazing panelists. So our first panelist for today is Gabe. So Gabe is a senior fellow and a chief scientist for AMD Research. He was an associate professor at Georgia Tech before he moved over to industry. So if you have questions related to industry and if you wanted to find out whether you have interest in academia, whether you want to follow industry positions, he's a great person to talk to and ask advice about questions like that. He's a fellow of IEEE and ACM. He won the Morris Workies Award in 2018, if I remember right. He's also in the Hall of Fame for Micro ISCA and HPCA. So I had the pleasure of sitting next to Gabe on this long flight back from Japan. And he gave me this one piece of advice that still sticks with me today. So he said that your entire research process is actually like a template. And your PhD is just a way for you to understand what that template really is, so that you can go out there and plug in all sorts of research problems into your template and you will have that problem solving ability. And I think that stuck with me mainly because now I'm able to go out there and put myself in projects that I otherwise would have been too intimidated to do so because I wouldn't consider myself an expert in the area or something like that. So he's an amazing person to talk to, and I'm so glad that he's with us here on this panel to encourage young students and help them navigate their journey through their PhD. So thanks, Gabe. Our second panelist is Gilles. Gilles is a principal engineer at Intel Labs, and he's also a really great friend of mine. I interned with him at Intel Labs. So he used to be a research scientist at IBM TJ Watson. He has an IEEE microtop pick, and his research these days is focused on designing computing systems for emerging cloud applications, like mitigating front-end stalls and things like that. So welcome, Gilles. Our third panelist is Boris Grot. He's an associate professor at University of Edinburgh. He has a micro hall of fame. He has multiple best paper awards, including one at HPCA, and he also has IEEE micro top picks. I don't know Boris that well personally, but I've heard many of his students say that he is the coolest and the funniest professor that they've ever had. So maybe I'm expecting a lot of jokes from you during this panel. I mean, no pressure, but I guess that's what your expectations are at this point. All right, so let's get started with the panel discussion. So before I begin, though, I want to make sure that I have established a few ground rules so that we can make this virtual panel experience a little bit smoother. So one, if you can mute your microphone, that would be really great because then we can tune out all of this background noise. Two, I have a bunch of questions that I crowdsourced from a diverse set of junior graduate students. So I spoke to them in detail about the stories and circumstances that surrounded and resulted in their question. So before I pose each question, I will be telling you a little bit about their stories and their experiences so that we can make this a little bit more personal and a little bit more engaging. That said, my main goal during this panel is to primarily seek questions from the audience. I see that there are close to 30 people here. So since they're the people who are actually here, rather than the ones who gave me their questions, I want to make that a higher priority. So feel free to type your questions into the chat window. Shazin and I will be monitoring the chat box very closely, and we will read out your questions to the panelists. All right, so now I have instructions for the panelists. So since we have only 3 panelists, I'd like to hear each of your thoughts. So it would be great if we could go about in a round robin fashion for each question. But it would also be really cool if you could not repeat the points that the other person has already talked about so that we can get through as many questions as possible. All right, so is everybody on board? Okay, that would require you to unmute yourself. So let's move on. All right, so the first broad category that I want to talk about is advice to your younger self. So the first question comes from a student who has heard his advisor, quote unquote, to run away screaming from neural network accelerators, since although that might be a cool thing to work on, it's a pretty saturated space to be working on at this point. So the student was told to find the next big thing that people should be working on and start working on that now so that he can get to define that space. So his question to you is, what are some strategies that you employ when you pick your research problems to work on? Do you work on what you think is going to become the next big thing? If yes, how do you place your bets?
Akshitha, do you want to also play traffic cop and maybe direct which one of us you want us to speak first?
That's a good idea.
I'll try to talk on.
If you're already talking, you can go first.
I'll go first since, yeah, exactly, since I'm talking, but I've been in, half my life is on phone meetings, so I know about, folks stopping on each other and not hearing each other.
Okay.
So, advice to younger self and topic selection. Personally, I think a critical part, although these things are kind of multifaceted, you have to be excited about the topic. Right? Because it could be the most important topic in the world, and if you want to just run away and hide from that topic and not do anything, you're not going to be successful in it. That said, also some topics kind of grow on you, right? A lot of times things seem uninteresting, daunting, whatever it may be, simply because you haven't actually started looking at that topic, you haven't started getting familiar with it, and familiarity breeds comfort as well. And once you get comfortable, it's easier to get excited by something. So there's that balance to be struck of, you got to know enough about it to know what you don't know, and that can certainly help. I don't know, but on the other hand, once you know what you know or know what you don't know, and if you're still not excited by it, it's harder to really do good research because your heart's not in it. So I think you have to balance those things. And then in terms of the timing of what's the next big topic or whatever, there's lots of different personalities, lots of different motivations for doing research. I think it depends on what you want to accomplish, right? If all you're looking for is, okay, I want to publish that next paper, or I want to get a paper with 10,000 citations, or I just want to graduate and never have to worry about eating only ramen noodles again. For different motivations, that'll help steer you in different directions, right? Some folks want the limelight, want the fame. Some folks just want to work on really interesting problems. Some folks want to do things that have a lot of impact, where they don't care if it's even published or not. They want it to affect real systems, affect real silicon, affect real software. And all of those things kind of factor in your decision-making process. I'm gonna pause here to let the other panelists speak too.
All right, Gilles, if you can go next.
Yeah, I think Gilles is chiming in. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this is an interesting question. I wish I had used advice when I was a grad student myself. Strategy to identify research topic that could lead to the next big thing. I think in hindsight, now for me, the most important thing is understanding workload trends. I think major disruptions come from workload software. So if you understand the workload on software, you can draw some conclusion in terms of their implication to the microarchitecture, computer architecture. That could give you a lot of inspiration in terms of the next big thing to follow. This is very critical. I mean, in industry, that's how we do. So if you see the disruption that new software application are causing, you can project that onto the microarchitecture. That could give you a lot of stuff to work on, or a lot of interesting topics. The second big thing is a lot of discussion, collaboration with colleagues, and especially students working on adjacent topics than yours. I realize that a lot of interesting interaction come from from these exchanges between students not necessarily working on the same topic but adjacent topic to you. Create a lot of interesting emulation. And also the last advice I will give is not being afraid to work outside established paradigms. I will stop there.
Okay, thanks, Gilles. Boris, you want to go next?
I think I will largely second Gabe's advice. In fact, I kind of feel like, he literally spoke what I wanted to say, which is that first and foremost, you have to be excited about your research. I think that's the most important thing. So, I think all of this excitement in ML space is really cool. I've been increasingly pushing into the systems world. And all of these things I'm finding, I'm discovering them to be really cool and I'm getting excited about them, but I still love microarchitecture. And so I always have one or two microarchitecture related projects brewing, just hardcore, old school, microarchitecture. And I don't know, it's not cool, at Micro, how many microarchitecture papers were there? But I love that stuff, and I, if I'm loving it and I think it matters, it's still relevant, why not work in it? And so I think my advice for grad students is, first and foremost, try to figure out what excites you. Is it microarchitecture? Is it ML? Is it intersection of these things? Is it systems? What is the thing that you're man, this is cool stuff. And then, with that understanding, try to see, how you can apply that, right? So I think it's, chasing the next big trend, it's cool. But remember, most of the people are going to be losers placing bets. And there are only going to be a few winners in terms of long-term bets. That doesn't mean we shouldn't place bets. It's a really good thing, but it's like a lottery. You can't expect to win, right? And so the further out you look, the more exciting it gets, but also the more kind of risky the research. And so again, second, with Gabe's, or I think what you said about the introduction to Gabe, which is ultimately PhD is just a formative period in your life. It's a really cool, really exciting period. You get to learn a lot about yourself, about research, but how many dissertations change the world, really, right? And so I think that's kind of the right perspective, is think about doing things that excite you and that hopefully matter, and not necessarily chasing the next big thing.
Great,
I'm
thanks,
going to add a
Boris.
quick follow-up comment there in that
Okay, cool.
I want to push back a little bit on characterizing it as winners and losers, in that, there really are no losers, right? I mean, the one paper that gets, a gajillion citations and an award or whatever, at this point in time, looking forward, there's just no way to predict what is actually going to matter that much. Sometimes these papers are kind of almost like throwaway papers. Or someone published something, it's just, it's a little idea I had, a little pet project, and we decided to submit it, and didn't realize it would turn into something really foundational. But even all the other papers out there, part of being in a research community is that we build upon each other, right? And so that paper that, wasn't as widely regarded might have triggered some thought, some idea that, Boris's student goes and pursues, that then, builds into something bigger. And so all of these things, work, it's, not really winners and losers, but we're all really working together, and really as a community, we win when we're pushing the field forward. And so, it's easy to sort of, be the frog in the well and, not see the whole world, especially, early on. And, but, realize that, all these contributions do add up, they do matter. And at this point in time, it's very difficult to say, what things are going to have that big impact or not. I've seen the opposite too. Plenty of papers where it's oh yeah, this is so exciting. 5 years later, we're oh, why do we spend so much time looking at that? That happens, and that's okay.
Yeah, I completely agree. You said you're pushing back, Gabe. That made me think I misspoke. I think we're on the same page.
It's a panel, right? We have to at least pretend to have some.
All right. Pretending to.
Are there any more follow-ups? Okay, so I just want to remind
on Gilles.
Oh,
Gilles
yeah.
made a great comment in terms of looking at workloads and such, and I think especially this is useful for myself, which is to look beyond just our field, right? Go read, the tech press, go read what's going on in the broader world, because that's what drives the workloads, is the use cases. What are people actually doing? You go look out there, especially among this older crowd of the panelists, how many of us are, watching, TikTok videos or, whatever the younger generations, doing? What are the other ways to do it? Like, literally only like a month ago, I finally set up a Venmo account, right? I mean, that's how old I am here. But, knowing what the rest of the world is doing and understanding the societal relevance actually does help inform and kind of build that intuition as to what types of technologies might eventually matter, what might eventually have impact. And if there's something that you're just like, I can't see why anyone would ever use this, it still might be useful, but it's important to have those thoughts and think through that. And that can also give you some, like, when you just really don't know whether I should do topic A or topic B and you need a tiebreaker, sometimes that gut instinct kind of helps out a bit.
I just want to follow up on that, because I think that's actually a really cool point. And it just occurred to me that I think there's something fundamentally different about today's world than the way things used to be, right? So the way things used to be is like kind of spec was the dominant workload as a class, workload class, right? And maybe if you're in parallel computing, you have like some HPC workloads, right? But those things were pretty established, and it was like, well, what do I do? I think now the workloads are really diverse and they're changing really fast. And I think some of the really exciting opportunities is actually picking up on trends, in terms of brand new workloads. Maybe it's virtual reality, autonomous driving, things like that. And I think that maybe for the first time ever, like as a young person, literally this is an age thing, which of course not everybody at grad school is young, but like all of a sudden you kind of maybe have an advantage compared to your supervisors who are like ossifying, I'm making fun of myself here, right? And like, we're not following these like cool things on the street, like I don't play video games, but a lot of people do, right? And so if you're like, holy heck, man, there's this like cool thing that like me and my friends are doing, but like, I don't see this in the press, like the older people are not talking about it. Maybe that's like the cool new workload. Like maybe that's the thing worth looking at,
Yeah, that makes sense.
With Boris, it's young researcher may have an advantage here.
That's true. So what are we like doing now? Accelerators for TikTok platforms? I don't know. But anyway, so I wanted to, before I move on to the next question, I wanted to remind people in the audience that I do want you to post your own questions. So don't feel like this is going to be it. We want your input as well. So type your questions into the chat box. I will be monitoring that, and I can read out your questions as needed. All right, so the second question comes from a student who just started grad school, and he said that he finds a lot of things extremely challenging, just moving from the fact that there are all of these courses with homeworks that have fixed answers and things that you already know that, or at least you know that there is an answer to the question, to a research problem where it's so open-ended and a lot of times you don't even know whether there is it's solvable or whether it's something that you can find a solution to. And that put together with the fact that he's now working with a brand new advisor and in a completely different lab setup and going through this whole phase of trying to understand what it means to publish and so on. It's just a lot of challenging things to face at the same time. So his question to you is, what was the most challenging thing that you did in grad school, and what did you learn from that experience, and how did that help you grow as a person? Gabe, can you go first?
Okay. I think, yeah, I think first and foremost, it's important to recognize that this is something that, most / all of us, have gone through, in many cases continue to go through. This is, it's a completely valid and, normal feeling, normal reaction. If for myself, I don't think there's any like single biggest, like here was the big challenge or whatever. It's almost like, death by 1,000 cuts, right? There's just so many things piling on top of you in terms of work responsibilities, new ways of thinking, the emotional, the health, and just all the different things that kind of pile up in your life that, no single thing is the thing that like, oh, if I can just solve this, then, my path is clear. And so, I don't know, as a result, one of the things that you're coming out the other side is I found that, hey, this is something survivable, right? There are parts of it where, yeah, it would have been nice if it was a little bit smoother one way or the other, but you push through it, and especially if you have a good support system, you take care of yourself in not just the intellectual parts of your life, but your family, friends, emotionally, physically, health-wise, or whatever, and you find balance. That helps you get through. And you also understand that research work in general is just one piece of life. That there is a much bigger world out there, and this is a very important part of your life at this point in time. But it's not everything, and it won't always be everything for most people. I mean, there are some people where research is 99.9% of their lives, and that's okay too. Right? There's no right or wrong answer for how much you want to do research, how much you care about it. It's all over the place. And so finding that right balance for yourself takes some experimentation, takes some trial and error. But kind of when you find that spot that helps you have a little bit of stability and a bit of a foundation to push through those more challenging times where things are unknown. I think as you go through it, you also learn that you will knock down some challenges, and there will always be more challenges. But eventually you hit kind of this unstable, steady state where there will always be more challenges, and you'll probably have a decent chance at knocking down those challenges, whatever they might be coming in the future. And this is largely tied to the whole imposter syndrome type of thing as well. What am I doing here? I don't know what I'm doing. All these other people on the surface appear to know what they're doing, even though they're all just wearing a mask like the rest of us, hiding it. And over time, something I've come to recognize, but it's something that comes with experience, is that I've personally come to find imposter syndrome as almost a positive signal. It means I'm doing something right, because I'm being pushed into new opportunities, new challenging situations where if I wasn't advancing, I would be comfortable, and I wouldn't be facing these imposter syndrome type of things, right? So I found a way to kind of internalize that and make it into a positive thing. Like, okay, I have no clue what's going on. I must be doing something right.
All right, Boris, do you want to go next?
Sorry, did you say Boris or Gilles? I didn't hear.
Yeah, Boris.
Okay, sure. So I guess I'll comment on the last bullet on the slide in terms of success strategies. So I think one thing I've learned over the years, and it definitely took a lot of kind of, experiential learning, is to understand how, you function during the day. What are the intervals of time where, you just feel really tuned in? When do you feel tired? How do you like to eat? Do you prefer a few big meals, a bunch of snacks? Like how do you maximize your efficiency, right? How do you maximize your productivity? And I think there's some self-discovery, kind of self-reflection that you have to do in order to figure this out, a bit of trial and error. Like, do you wake up in the morning and you feel really lethargic for half the day, and then you wake up at night, you're a night owl? Or do you wake up in the morning and you're like, wow, man, I can do anything, and then by 1 o'clock you're dying, right? And so I think you need to figure this out and then structure the day to maximize your productivity based on that, right? So I'm definitely I'm terrible, right? I love staying up late, but I actually function better in the mornings. This is not a great combination, but I do try to optimize for this. I function best in the morning, so I'm really clear-headed. I'm really, creative, I guess, is the way to put it, in the mornings. And so I try not to have meetings in the mornings, right? I try. I don't always succeed. And so this is the time when I like to reflect. I like to read. I will write papers, proposals. I'm really creative, right? That's my creative time. This took a lot of time to figure this out. And so I urge everybody to reflect on yourself, on your, how does your body function, and try to tune it and tune your regime, your schedule to maximize your productivity. I think it can make a phenomenal difference in how much you get out of a single workday.
Great, thanks, Boris. So I heard that Gilles didn't get my question, so I just want to repeat the question to you, Gilles. So the question is, what was the most challenging thing that you did in grad school? What did you learn from that experience? And yeah, so that is the question. Gilles?
Yeah, so the most challenging thing in grad school, I think it's also true even today, not just in grad school. For me, it was maintaining a good research-life balance. That was very important. I mean, trying not to be on crunch mode all the time. You're gonna quickly burn out, and that's not healthy. You're getting stressed out. That's really not good. So basically, I think the key to that for me is discipline. Even today, this is what I do. So discipline, because I try to make space for my outdoor activities. I like to go out and run. That's critical because it's good to disconnect from the work from time to time. It clears your mind and makes you more sharp. And I try to schedule time to just read papers and do some work. So it tries to be more disciplined that way. And I try to surround myself with positive friends. That's very good also for the research. People who make you happy. I would say maintaining this healthy research life balance is critical. Otherwise, it's going to be very hard to go for the long run, and then you're going to be stressed out, and then nothing good comes out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Gilles, because that really nicely takes me to my next question. So my next question was completely based on that, wherein the first 2 years of my grad school, I burnt myself out completely by just working all the time. And that totally burnt me out. And later on, I realized that having a fixed schedule to do a variety of different things is making me far more productive. And I wish I had known that early on. So my next question was, what success strategies, similar to that, do you wish that you had known when you originally started out with grad school? Do you want to go? I know Boris already answered this question, and just since you're already talking.
Sorry, I didn't realize we're like literally doing the bullets one by one. I apologize.
Oh no, feel free to jump in. It's totally fine. It's just I wanted to give you like the personal story behind the student's experience for why the question came about, which is why I'm walking through them. But like you can totally jump in however you please. So that's totally fine.
So Akshitha, can you repeat the question? Sorry, I missed the last part.
Oh, so the question was, what success strategies do you wish that you had known about when you originally started off with grad school?
Yeah. Okay, so first strategy, they are many, but for me at least, I wish I had known is how to efficiently triage information between what's essential, what's non-essential. So as a young grad student, I think you overwhelmed with information on papers, etc., and you try to make your way to the thing that will help you, and then in that journey, you read things that are probably not very relevant to your work, right? So getting a good advisor that will put you on the right track, it's really important. I mean, for me, it has been, I've been very lucky to have worked with very good advisors, mentors, right? So they will give me the right advice. They will, don't look at this paper, you're just wasting your time, go read this paper instead, right? So I think getting the right advice mentor so that you can triage between essential and non-essential information has been critical. Also, I wish I had learned how to communicate my ideas better, because if you're not an effective communicator, it could take a long time for you to get to the point where you want to probably not effective. That part of leadership as well. So being able to communicate your idea clearly, more effectively. I wish I had spent more time on that when I was in grad school. And anyway, you have to do it when you're at work. So those are the two important things that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks, Gilles. Gabe, do you have anything to say about that?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I just got interrupted by my boss.
Oh, okay. So the question was, what are some success strategies that you wish you had known in grad school when you originally got started?
Oh, okay. So it depends on what your definition of success is. We'll start with kind of the classic one where I think most people are thinking like, publications and things of that sort. And, I think part of it is striking that right balance of not reading too much and making sure you read enough, right? If you want to make sure the relevant work, the background, what's already been done. You don't want to reinvent the wheel. But I definitely found at times that, if I read too much, then it sort of leaves you in this position of like, well, it's all been done, right? And you almost your creativity gets a little bit constrained by, just you've been too tainted, you've been too biased. And, kind of the classic example is that every idea you come up with was already invented by IBM in the 1960s, right? And to some extent, largely true, but, technology changes, context changes, workloads and use cases changes. And even though, if you took those ideas and just try to shove them into a modern system, it wouldn't work without actually quite a bit of creativity, new research, and engineering. And so, if you get too biased by, paths already taken, yeah, the path was taken, but on a different map, right? And we're in a new map now, and revisiting some of those old strategies, can actually, result in new things. So it's a bit of a balance of, how do you not, get overly constrained. And, that's something that, takes a bit of time, takes, to some extent, just, trial and error, that building that experience. I think that's going to be a common theme that we'll see, and in some ways unsatisfying, right? Yeah, you wish that we can just come up here, all of us, old folks, with a pre-canned, algorithm for you to follow, and success follows from that. And it's a highly stochastic, type of process, and kind of trial and error and learning, learning what works for yourself, like Boris said, is just an incredibly important part. The payoff, though, is that really applies and will pay dividends well outside of your research life, right? Like really learning about what works for you, what doesn't work for you, how you operate well, both in research and otherwise, is something that you will be able to use to optimize your overall life for years and years and years to come. So there's a lot to be gained from the PhD beyond I know how to do research now.
Yeah, that makes sense. I believe Shazeen has the follow-up question. So Shazeen.
Yeah, so I think this touches on a lot of the points that all of you panelists made, and it is a challenge that even I run into, not only in grad school, but now, which is this, differentiating the essential from the non-essential, especially in terms of, reading. So I don't know if Boris remembers this. When he visited AMD, I had this chat with him about archive papers, people just posting more and more of their work out there. And more than the publishing aspect of it, my concern is just keeping up with it, and figuring out like how much should I spend reading, how much should I spend time independently thinking about problems. So my specific question to the panelists is, what are some of your strategies? And I to the extent you can personalize your answer, I think me and the audience would greatly appreciate it, in the sense, how much time do you spend reading, and how much time do you advise your students to spend reading? What are some of your strategies to sift out the noise and focus on the papers that that need to be read, versus there's like this barrage of papers that's coming out. So again, I don't know who went last first, so Akshitha, do the traffic cop thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Boris, do you want to say something to that?
Sure. I'll give you my personal perspective, but it's biased just because of my position. So I think that finding time to read is really difficult. So I mean, it's like grad school versus, like academic or, really busy industry person. I don't think it's the same thing. So I'll try to tailor the response specifically, for the audience, which is that I think you just simply have to structure your day to make time for reading, right? And that goes back to my earlier remarks about figuring out when are the certain things you do, like when is the most effective time to do certain things, right? So like for me, reading, unless it's like mandatory, like it's a creative thing, right? Like I read because I want to learn about an area, or I want to get stimulated. Like I want to like channel my thinking in a particular direction. So I'll start with a paper, and then maybe I'll put it down halfway through, and like I'll just let my mind drift and start thinking, right? So I find that a really effective strategy. And so I try to do this kind of creative reading, you know, learning reading in the mornings, right? Like, again, that's just my schedule. And so I'll just prioritize that, you know, no meetings, like no email, right? Like that's it. And so the related thing is, of course, learning to read effectively, right? I think that's like one of the most important things that as a young grad student, like starting out, you can do is figure out how to read a paper. You don't need to understand every single little thing. That takes 4 hours, right? So like, what's the main idea? Or, you know, if you know the main idea and you actually want something else out of the paper, you know, how do they structure their arguments? Because I'm writing a paper and I think that paper is really cool, right? So like you can read with a specific purpose. And so that saves you tons of time because you know exactly what to focus on in that paper. So I think my advice simply comes down to understand what you want to read, like what's the area, right? Make time for it. And then be extremely effective at that task, you know, like zero in on the exact thing you care about and just don't read more than you need to.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Boris. Gilles, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I can add a few things. So I think that's a very important question, and it's valid for grad students as well as even myself, and I'm struggling with that all the time. So my strategy, maybe as Boris said, might be some differences for grad students or academics or industry folks, but my strategy has always been to reserve some time to read papers. When I say read paper, I mean that it's important to keep up. There's so many papers, right? Understand the main ideas. And usually what I found very interesting is sometimes I don't really have to read the entire paper. I can just understand the topic the paper is addressing. And then I reach out to the authors. Having a chat of 30 minutes is better for me than reading the paper. I mean, everyone today is nice. You know, I've done that with Boris. Reach out to him, like, let's talk about this paper, right? So your paper, right? Let's go about it. And for me, it's more information and time saving than going to the paper and trying to dissect the paper, right? So I try to do that once a week. Usually Fridays are my day where I do that because refreshing my mind. And then making sure that you understand the topic, making sure that you have a good idea of the related work, and then understanding what you are chasing, basically. So for each project I'm involved, I'm trying to, I know exactly what the related work is about. I try to keep up with new papers by talking to authors, something like that, and I know where I'm going, my direction. So these three, for me, it's a kind of a recipe to kind of trying to keep me in check on making sure that I'm not spending too much time reading unnecessary things. So I think it's a struggle, I know, because there are so many papers, and I think possible to keep up.
Yeah, that's true. All right, great. I wanted to remind people to post your questions in the chat box. Again, I do want to take questions from you. So it'd be great if you could go ahead and type your questions. But I'm going to move on.
Comment there.
Oh, so yeah, go ahead.
I'd say, you know, at least just speaking for myself, I'm not all that disciplined. And so I sometimes have to set up, you know, I have to play little games with myself, right? So it's like, okay, well, I can't do this until I go read that paper, right? Or like, I'll just set up, you know, arbitrary rules, but I'll try to enforce them. And then, you know, it's part of the mind games, but, you know, sometimes, you know, whatever works. And, you know, it kind of gets back to Boris's, you know, comment, you know, figure out what works for you. And, you know, I'll figure out, you know, it's okay, I'll set up arbitrary rules and, you know, kind of make a little game out of it. It's okay, well, once I get to, it's like almost like dealing with like, you know, my 5-year-old, right? It's like, okay, you can't do this until you've actually gone and, you know, finished your dinner or whatever, right? So it's like, okay, well, I can't do this fun thing until I've actually gone and read that paper. And then like a 5-year-old, you know, I go and try to find ways to circumvent the rules I set myself. But it's like, okay, you know, I'm not going to read the paper, but, you know, I'll go watch the YouTube video of the presentation, which basically has a summary of the information in a fantastic form. I could play it at 1.25 speed or whatever to get through it faster. And I said, oh, yeah, that's good enough. I got the information. I could go do my fun thing that I've set as a report, right? So, you know, figure out what works for you. You know, we're not all as disciplined as Gilles is. but whatever works, works.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Gabe. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next topic, and hold on. Yeah, so in the interest of time, I guess I'm just going to prioritize the questions on the slide. So the question that I wanted to talk about here was like a very interesting conversation that I had with at least 4 international students who sort of said the same things. So basically, well, one of them, she said that culturally, she's very used to just listening to what her supervisor has to say. So although she has differences of opinion from her advisor, she isn't quite sure how to bring them up or if she even should. So what advice do you have for young graduate students who perhaps even feel intimidated by their advisor oftentimes to express a difference of opinion in the research project that they have going on? So Boris, do you want to go first?
Wow, this is a great question. I think this is not easy. I mean, as an aside, unfortunately, the first thing I have to say, this is not going to immediately help anybody on the line, but I think that, there's a great deal of education, I think, that has to happen among the advisors themselves. Like, I know at Edinburgh, we really started running, like training session for like experienced supervisors, including myself, to like actually, like the world is changing, and I think there's an increasing degree of awareness about this. People talk about it. So I think that there's a lot of, a lot of need for the departments, industry organizations to address this issue and basically like level the playing field, I think that's a really important thing to understand, that sometimes today the world is just not perfect, and that's not cool. And like, you don't have to kind of take it. But how do you deal with the actual problem, on a day-to-day basis? Yeah, I don't know. I guess like maybe try to just have a frank conversation, like actually like schedule a completely separate meeting where it's very clear that the agenda is not going to be research in any way, and just say, hey, look, sometimes I'm just not comfortable. Maybe in your departments, there's an established process to like mediate. Maybe you can talk to another supervisor. I know when I was a PhD student, we had a couple of female professors who were, renowned, like they had a reputation for kind of being able to understand and give really good advice to female PhD students, not necessarily mediation advice, just in general. And so maybe there's somebody else in the department that you can talk to and just get really good day-to-day advice. I think I would not try to ignore the issue and sweep it under the rug. I would try to find a workable solution, but ideal and non-confrontational one. I think that would be my advice.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And that's a great idea too. Gabe, do you want to go next?
Sure, and this is a great question because it doesn't go away. This is something that even in industry I see among more junior researchers versus more senior researchers. There are big personalities, small personalities, implied rank, and things of that sort. And so, as Boris said, it's something you don't want to just try to bury and hope it goes away, because it will potentially affect you for years if you if you can learn how to deal with it well. It could be a great boost. In terms of actual, concrete tactics and strategies, I've been, mentoring folks here at AMD Research, and I definitely do see this. And so there's a couple things, part of it is, giving them, and as someone not in their chain of command, it's easier to have kind of a one-on-one conversation. So this kind of gets back to Boris's comment about talking to someone, separate, that isn't your advisor as well, to get input. And I try to give mentoring advice in terms of, what are good tactics, what are good strategies, how do you, make your voice heard, how do you disagree in polite fashion. In a grad school context, if you have a lab with more senior students, many of them have started navigating this path, and can basically, you can talk to them, and in some cases have them to help kind of break the ice. Maybe they can ask the leading question first in a group meeting that sort of challenges the advisor's position on something, and then that gives you a more comfortable on-ramp to then follow up with more questions. And so the more senior students are usually more comfortable with what might be perceived as kind of some confrontation or conflict Well, not all the times. It kind of depends on the relationships, but there may be other folks that can, in some ways, almost like reverse ganging up on your advisor, but you don't want to make it, quite so. You don't want to put the advisor on the defensive. But in a soft fashion, open up the topic so that the more junior folks can, have an easier way to have that conversation. Or in some cases, just having the more senior folks, role model, right? And it just makes it a little more comfortable. It's like, well, if, this person or that person has asked these questions, it kind of sets a norm or a kind of a social convention that, yeah, it's okay to ask these type of questions. The other part is if you're, not so sure, you can start with a leading question to your advisor. Like, is it okay if I ask you this? Right? And, any sane advisor should hopefully say, yeah, it's perfectly fine to ask a question. Right. And at that point, you've kind of been granted permission, right? Like you've been given a green light. Okay, let's have this conversation, as opposed to if you just straight up, go and challenge someone on some particular topic or whatever. Right. I do this even today. I'll come and be with kind of play, even though I kind of know what my position, I'll start off playing a little bit more ignorant than I am. Right. It's like, well, I'm not so sure about this, so I wanted to discuss this. Right. Maybe I'm not understanding something correctly. So, why don't you help me see your wisdom and correct my thinking, right? And that forces the conversation in a less, directly confrontational fashion.
Yeah, that's actually a really cool strategy.
I'm
all right. No, it's just like I'm just absorbing this so for when I hopefully become a professor. So yeah, all right. So like moving on to Gilles, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think this is as Boris and Gabe said, this is a very important topic, sensitive one as well, not only for grad students, but also in industry. I'm glad that this was raised here, because I'm one of the allies myself in my company for those issues. Regarding the first question, when is the right time to switch advisors? What I will say, this is also true for grad as well as a young researcher. I don't think I will recommend not to have one advisor only. What I mean by that is that you want to be surrounded by mentors, sponsors, allies, probably collaborators that know your advisor. This is a great way to balance things out, and then it might not prevent you from switching advisor if there are 2 or 3 people talking to your advisor you're collaborating with, and or if it reaches the point where you have to switch advisor, it might make things easier because you have maybe a co-advisor, you have a mentor, who is a senior. I recommend, for example, in the faculty, in the department, you may have other faculty who might be willing to talk to you or collaborate with you. You can find mentors or sponsors in industry, senior guys in industry. All this is great because it helps you balance things out, and also there's one question about the power dynamics, right? It helps. I think it also helps with that. That's what I recommend also for a young researcher in industry, right? When you have a mentor or sponsor that can talk to your manager or to your advisor, it helps things out, right? This kind of mediation kind of helps things not to escalate, right? It slows down things. And how to deal with differences of opinion. One thing that I find very effective is like, instead of trying to convince your advisor of a different direction, I find it rather effective to come with some data already. You don't say, oh, I think we could do this, that we could do this problem that way or that way. The advisor might shut you down. I find it very effective to say, okay, I did some research, I did some preliminary analysis, these are the data. Let's talk about what opinion do you have. It shifts the discussion, right? It's no longer, I bet your advisor won't be that descriptive. If it sees that the data are speaking for themselves, right? So if you have time on the side, you have some intuition, you're not sure if you're right, do really work by yourself, gather some data and then present the data to advisor. That way, your decision will be different than if you just share an idea, right? If you're not sure, right? It depends on the personality, right? Some people are more shy, they won't have the courage to, to discuss with the advisor. Some people, in that case, you may want to have some preliminary data that you can share with the advisor. And again, if you have this other collaborators or co-advisor or sponsor, it might help. We can also talk in the meeting about this idea and shift the power a little bit. Regarding the last, identify abuse, same thing. I think if you have more than one advisor or ally or sponsor, it might help with such issues.
If you, thanks for that, Gilles. And if you are wondering how do I go about establishing that collaboration with a industry person or perhaps another advisor or a professor in your own department, I know I was wondering that at some point. Do you have any advice about how to establish that relationship?
I think people are very open. I mean, you can approach. I would recommend shoot an email. Request an informational discussion. And I would bet if you reach out to 2-3 people, they will all respond. I receive such emails all the time. And or at conferences, when you attend a conference, this is a great way to start collaboration or to find advisor. You can meet the person face to face, discuss with the person about their research project, and show interest in collaborating. And it always works. I mean, for me, it has worked. So I bet Boris would say the same.
Mm-hmm. So I actually wanted to move on to the next topic, but Gabe and Boris, if you have anything more to add in this topic of advisor-advisee relationships, please feel free to say something. All right, so my next topic is overcoming mental roadblocks. So the first question was actually quite a difficult conversation that I had with a female African-American student who was in her second year. So she said that ever since she started her PhD program, she feels a lot like the university just gave her an admit by mistake and she doesn't actually quite belong there. She feels that a lot of people don't really value her opinions or take what she has to say seriously. So her question to you is, how do I make myself feel comfortable in an environment where fundamentally I feel like I shouldn't even be here? Boris, do you want to start?
Yeah, again, I mean, yes, I think this is like a super important question, and it's also difficult. I think we all wish there was an easy fix to this. There's not. I think these issues are cultural. It's going to take a long time to resolve these. I think trying to actually answer the question and give some specific advice is the main thing that comes to my mind, at least, is some notion of support group, like-minded people, who may be experiencing similar things, right? I think in your particular example, in the example you used an African-American woman, but maybe other people who are experiencing similar issues, but who are not necessarily, African-Americans, right? And so speak to them. I think there's a lot of, at the very, very least, there's a lot of comfort in realizing that, hey, I'm not the only one, right? Because I think the primary issue here, or one of the issues, is this notion, I do not belong, right? But then if you realize there are a lot of other people who feel the same way, then all of a sudden, one starts to feel that, okay, I'm actually more normal than I thought, right? Which is just a perception thing. Of course, everybody is normal. So I think that that's a starting point. And I think, again, it's this notion of speaking to others who may be sympathetic, especially in more senior positions, raising awareness, again, either by forming some sort of an organization, having meetups, creating this open atmosphere, advertising the fact that, hey guys, we're here, we're meeting for coffee once a week, 3 o'clock, come and talk to us about your issues, And so I think that, kind of growing this notion of awareness that there are people who are feeling left out, and getting these people to come and share their experiences, and also how are they dealing with this, and also speaking to others, you know, in more senior positions for advice, and also to raise awareness that, hey, there's this group of us that's like feeling left out. What can we do? How can the department make us feel more welcome, or organization, as the case may be? I think, you know, that's the way to do it. I mean, unfortunately, you know, it's an effort, but like it's these types of actions that will lead to kind of cultural change in the longer run, and also individuals feeling better about belonging in these types of places in the shorter run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Gabe, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah. So I think I agree with Boris in that, you know, finding a good, you know, peer group is certainly very useful. And again, it doesn't have to be, you know, the exact same, you know, whatever, you know, categorization, or, you know, however you want to compartmentalize things, or how the outside world wants to compartmentalize things. Yeah, I found when I was in grad school, you know, one thing we did was we just made a weekly kind of get together, just opened it up to grad students and just said, yeah, we're just going to hang out and chat. And, you know, we had folks from a variety of different backgrounds. You know, some people never showed up, some people showed up regularly. And kind of an interesting thing was one of my friends who was actually from political science started showing up because I guess, you know, he didn't have a group to talk to about things. And so, you know, getting kind of going outside your own department is actually another, you know, good source of finding, you know, peers that may be feeling similar, having, you know, similar types of issues, and it provides another source for, you know, commiserating, or, you know, at least, you know, sort of the whole, like, you know, misery loves company type of thing. You find a wider set of, you know, like-minded folks, and you can see that, yeah, you know, this isn't so uncommon, that there are actually many of us. And, you know, one thing that helped me early on was the realization that, you know, it's not if it's an old saying or some kind of, you know, adage, right? It's like when you look at everyone else, what you always see is their highlight reels. It's the trailer for the big amazing movie. When you look inside yourself, you see the blooper reel, right? You see all the the takes that, you know, had to be reshot, and you see all of the warts and issues and everything else, right? And it's a very asymmetric view of the world, right? We see everything internally, good, bad, whatever it may be. Outside world, you know, we're all putting on, you know, our best appearances, and you have to, you know, once you recognize that asymmetry and that everyone is doing the same thing, you know, I think that realization was somewhat freeing for me, that, you know what, we're all just faking it, right? The folks that look like they're not, they are probably the biggest fakers, right? And, you know, that gives a little bit of comfort, a little bit of solace. It doesn't make the day-to-day challenges necessarily any, you know, easier. The technical work, still the technical work. You still got to go work on things, and, you know, you still got to work hard. But it gives a little bit of, you know, comfort. At least it did for me.
Yeah, that's true. Gilles, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, this is such an important topic, and that young lady is so right. The first thing I want to add is that I think we also as leaders have to do more on this, right? I think we have to be more proactive, because our position of power make us many. Like we have to be accountable. We have to make things much more easier for people like that. And this is not just a problem in grad school; it's also a big problem in industry, right? What Boris mentioned, a support group is critical. Leader, I think that's what we even as intern we have the network of Inter-African American, because we have similar issues there. But I think finding support group is critical. But we also as leader have to be able to reach out easily to minorities or female. And I will encourage that young lady or other people to join similar initiative like the workshop for women and minorities. That I think it has been held with Micro or Ishka, I don't remember.
Yeah, with Micro.
Yeah, Micro.
With Micro, yeah. So it would be nice to have it also with Ishka. All major conferences should have something similar. I will encourage that young lady or other people to join these workshops, because it's a support group. I think they will feel more comfortable there, and then they will find the right support of people that will make that will ease the transition in the belonging, right? That make them feel a sense of belonging, and then they will find allies there. I think that's very important, because without that, it's very difficult to be engaged. And I understand why some might not feel comfortable coming to big conferences or also on campus, for instance. So I think this is critical. So we as leaders, we have to do more. We have to multiply this kind of initiative, and then we have to reach out. So when we, even on campus, we need to create more such safe places where they can go and talk about their struggles, and talk about their issues, and then make the transition easier. That's something that we should tackle as leaders in this community. But I mean, there are already some tools there, right? So, and I just encourage them to use them.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I found those workshops personally very useful myself. So, oh, sorry, I made a mistake. Okay. Yeah, so I found those workshops useful myself. So if you want more advice, and if you are stuck and you want to talk to peers and mentors, those workshops are a great place for you to go attend and then have conversations with those people. I think we already. Yeah, go ahead.
In that, because to understand, especially we're feeling right now, not everyone can always attend these workshops, but go look at the list of speakers, panelists, or whatever at a workshop, and you have a ready-made list of people you can reach out to. As Gilles says, you can send emails to folks, and there's a list of people who are predisposed to be sympathetic, who are willing to reach out and answer your mail or whatever. So it's a nice little cheat sheet. And another comment just for everyone online: no matter what you feel, no matter what you're facing, you belong. You are part of our community. You belong here, absolutely.
Thanks for that. So I think we already spoke a little bit about work-life balance and also something about mental stress. So if anybody has anything to add, please go ahead, but otherwise I will move on to our next topic. Okay. So the next topic was career after grad school. So the question was, there are a lot of cool things that you can do when you're in grad school, and you can pick and prioritize based on A, what do you want to do after grad school, or B, what's most exciting to you right now, or C, maybe you have a great collaboration and you love that collaboration and you just want to go with it. So what was the coolest thing that you did in grad school that, well, became the primary reason for where you are today, and also just gave you a lot of happiness while doing it? Gilles, do you want to go first?
Okay, yeah, sure. And yeah, interesting question. So the career after grad school, the tremendous thing that you can do. For me, I believe after grad school or during grad school, I was very inclined to be in a job where I will impact somebody's life, product. That's why I ended up in the research lab in industry, because I had this desire of really doing something, something impacting product, impacting life. That's why I ended up in research lab in industry. It could be different from other people, but I think what shaped my view are the project that I work on when I was in grad school, the interaction that I had with my collaborators. I was talking to, I think I had mentors and advisors that were in touch, that were really impacting industry already in academia. So there were close collaboration with Intel folks, for instance. For me, that was an opening into what I could possibly do after after grad school, and I was fascinated by that. So that's one thing that I could say about that. Yeah, I can come back later, but I will let the other Gabe and Boris chime in.
All right, sounds good. Boris, do you want to go next?
So I think for me, I don't think there was like a single coolest thing I did specifically in grad school that somehow shaped, the rest of my career. I think it was what happened before grad school. So I got my undergrad, I worked in the industry for a couple of years, and I did not like that. No offense to my colleagues in the industry, but it was actually, but to be honest, I think, jokes aside, I think a bunch of you guys are in research side of things. I was just a developer, like I was writing Verilog and like doing verification. I mean, it was like your typical like engineer job, which is super cool and awesome. I was like developing a really cool chip or working on development of it, but it's just not who I am. Like, I'm not like this hacker dude who like just sits all day and writes code. And it took me a couple of years to realize that, because I love computer science, I loved undergrad, I do enjoy programming, but like just writing code all day is not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. It took a couple of years to understand that. And it took a bunch of self-reflection to understand that actually what I really love is like somehow working with people and like making an influence in people's lives. And so, I don't know, it was like a real important realization. And that drove me to grad school. And like, I don't know, that just kept pushing me. Like, I want to be a prof because I feel like, I can be intimately involved in science and research, but I can also work directly with people. And like, somehow I like to think that like, maybe at the end of the day, I'm actually making a difference in somebody's life. And that makes me really, really happy. And so I think that's like kind of my big advice. And that really goes back to what I was saying even earlier, is like, I think it's really good to do self-discovery and just understand what motivates you, what makes you happy in the mornings.
Yeah. Gabe, do you have anything to add?
So, I mean, not technical, but probably the coolest thing that I learned in grad school that has had long-lasting impact was learning how to cook. That's something that, you have to feed yourself, and it's a bit of an escape. You turn your brain off, or you use your brain in a very different way for a while. It's still it suits programmers quite well. Like, you have a recipe. It's kind of like, your code or your instructions. You've got all your ingredients, which are your, data inputs that you have to schedule in a particular way. And it's gotten bad enough that when I'm cooking, my brain is actually pre-scheduling, trying to figure out what things do I need to prefetch, what things, do I have to start the water boiling first, because that's a long latency operation, so on and so forth. But that's beside the point. But that's something that has actually been very impactful for me, and in some weird ways, probably maybe a little more successful, just because I have a way to relieve stress. I have some outlets, and learning those things is important. As Boris emailed me earlier. Yes, are you on a bike? Yes, I'm on a bike right now. I've been on a bike this whole time. I don't just sway, back and forth. And part of this is, you got to find time to get stuff done that needs to get done, but that needs doing. But hey, there's concurrency, there's parallelism. You can find ways to co-schedule stuff. And I'm getting, two things done at once here. And so, finding out what works for you is pretty important. But in terms of other aspects, I want to be frank. Part of where I am today is luck. Sometimes there's just things you can't plan for, and things just work out a particular fashion. And I don't want to pretend that somehow I'm superior or better. When it's just sometimes the dice comes out in your favor. That's not to say that there's not work involved and things of that sort. But life is unpredictable. And sometimes that does weigh into it, and you will see at times that maybe someone that you think didn't work as hard, their paper gets accepted or whatever. These things do happen, and what you have to do is kind of work past that, control the things that you can control. It's kind of out of your control whether or not their paper gets in or not. And so that those types of lessons, I found to be, pretty useful and, very successful in the kind of life after grad school, right? And in terms of like, how did these things set me on my my career path? What factors did I consider? Part of it was, like Boris said, you can figure out what you enjoy doing. For me, I I realized that I really, just enjoy doing research, right? Being the first one to discover something, even if it's, a small incremental thing, I was the first one to do that and publish that. There's a certain, satisfaction to that. And I learned early on, this kind of a thankful thing, to not get too wrapped up in, like top tier conferences, that, the other. No, workshop paper, it's still, you're the first one publishing that. That's still really cool, right? And, getting that enjoyment is something I learned that, yeah, that's something I enjoy doing, I want to do. And so when I got to picking career choices, that's the main thing. It's like, I want to do, research. And I could do that in academia, I could do that in industry. One factor that did impact me was the fact that, I talked to people and I came to the realization that in general, it's not impossible, but in general, it's easier to go from academia to industry than from industry to academia, right? Just, part of it is that, in the academic world, you kind of have to be publishing, you have to be active in the community. People need to know you for you to more easily, typically get an academic position. Whereas going the other way around, if you've been in the academic world, people know you at some extent, and moving over to industry, people, that's usually the easier thing. So that biased my career path a little bit in that, I'll go do this, professor thing first. And, if it works out, that's what I want to do, great. And, if not, the transition over is, in general, typically easier to do. If people are wondering, both jobs are fantastic. It's just a matter of personal circumstance. It's not like I got fed up with academia or anything of that sort.
Yeah. So something that Boris was talking about earlier reminded me of something that Louis Cesare told me in my second year. He told me that as a young graduate student, it's easy to base the impact of your research in terms of the type of publications that you've had or just the sheer number of publications. But then your impact model is a multi-dimensional feature vector. It can be many things. It can be, are you open sourcing software? Are you perhaps changing someone's life for the better? Are you maybe pushing something in production, or are you just like coming up with a creative new idea that maybe that's not super practical in terms of practice, but maybe it triggered someone else to do something really cool. So there's so many such aspects that can define the impact of your research. So don't just get bogged down by, oh, I need to have like top tier publications or like 10 of them and whatnot. And that advice I think was really useful because it got me thinking about what I should be doing and what I should be valuing and what gives me the most happiness. So I think that was really useful for me. So this question is nice in that aspect, that you get to think about those things for yourself and then decide that. All right.
It's
so
all about,
I just want to add one more thing. That's a great comment. So one more thing that I wanted to add is like, when you are, one thing that motivated me to go to industry, research lab in industry, has been also the fact that when you do research and then let's say you come up with a great idea, you publish a great paper, this is great, this is fine. For me, it was kind of middle of the road because you just proven that, okay, you have a point, but where does this idea end? That was the missing link for me, for instance. And that's one of the reasons why I joined industry research lab, because I could still publish. I can have a great idea, I could publish, but I can also make sure that the idea ends up somewhere. And for me, that was the bottom line. That was the missing link that actually that's the thing that convinced me to join research, because I try to work on both ends, take a concept to an idea, to a paper, to an endpoint. For me, I found it very rewarding. It depends, just chime in.
Yeah, thanks, Gilles. So we have one question from someone in the audience who wants to voice her question out. Angela Jen, if you can ask your question.
Hello. First of all, thank you so much for taking the time to share your experiences. I'm actually an undergraduate studying CS right now. Well, I'm out of place here, but I was just wondering if you guys had any advice, because I'm currently having a lot of difficulty trying to decide between grad school and industry. And also, I'm currently involved in undergraduate research, and I was wondering if you had any advice as to what things I should focus on taking out.
Okay, if I
Hey, Akshitha, I think your typing is very loud.
Oh no, I think that's Jesse.
Or someone's typing very loudly.
Yeah, just since you have the mic, please go ahead.
Yeah, if I can just, I mean, for me, I would say my advice for you would be what really motivates you. I mean, this is super important because grad school is if you can figure out what motivates you, clearly, it will be an easy choice. Because grad school means a few more years of research. You have to be passionate about that, right? So, do you feel like you have passion in research? Do you feel you have the stamina to dig into one topic for several years? Do you feel satisfied when you have these great ideas, and then you want to deliver a result, you want to write a paper about it? Or do you want to work on some practical specific tasks? So I would say you have to figure out what your motivation, what you're really passionate about before making this choice. You can probably reach out to people in industry who are doing that to have a sense of what it feels like to work in industry, and then talk more to grad students in your school about how they like what they are working on, if they feel happy. That would be my advice. I will let know what I want. I will let Gabe and Boris chat.
Okay. So we are running a little out of time, but I know Shazeen wanted to add something. So I will let Shazeen say whatever she wanted to say.
Oh, no, I just wanted to remind you that we asked for 8 to 9:30 from the panel, and we are there. So we do have a few more questions which are being privately pinged to Akshitha and me. I'll let the panel say if they have a couple of more minutes to stay around, but I wanted to seek explicit permission before just barging into the calendar. So, or we could.
Can we set up a Slack channel on the AskPlus Slack so we can continue this discussion if other folks have other questions? I want to make one follow-up point to what Gilles said about how should you do PhD or not. And for me there's a couple of things that were useful. I did some undergraduate research type of stuff, so I got a little bit of a taste for it. The other thing is that this isn't necessarily like a religious calling or something of that sort. If you start your PhD program and you decide it's not for you, there's no shame in stopping. In many cases, it's actually a way to get a free master's degree if you get funding and things of that sort. So if it turns out that it's not for you, take the free master's and move on and probably get a bigger salary than your professor, right? It's not that big of a deal. I've had PhD students where they decided that maybe this wasn't the right thing, and I've counseled them, stop. If your heart's not in it, if this isn't for you, why spend 4, 5, 6, 7 years of your life doing this? And this is particularly hard for some folks who are further along, right? You've already spent how many years doing this PhD, and it's like, well, if I just do it another year or two more, I'll finish my degree. But if you don't want to do research, what good is that degree to you, right? What we do in processor pipelines is as soon as you've determined that you've gone down the wrong path, you stop, you flush the pipeline, and you re-steer, right? To save a measly couple of nanoseconds. We're talking about years of your life that you will never get back, right? We only get to go around the sun so many times. Make good use of that time. If this isn't for you, no problem. Go re-steer and go find out, that right path, or hopefully a better path. And that's perfectly fine. Research isn't for everyone. Hopefully it's something that works out for all y'all, but if it's not, there's no problem in that. And go do what makes sense for you. Go do what's right for you.
Great, thanks, Gabe. And so I think we should end on time. I just wanted to make a couple of points. So one, we will be setting up a Slack channel for those people who had asked their questions towards the end. So feel free to go type your questions into the Slack channel and we can have them answered. Also, I just want to remind you that the Young Architect student presentations are on YouTube. Our students have taken a lot of effort into making these presentations happen. So please go and check them out. Maybe give them a thumbs up for their video. And also, of course, I want to thank our panelists for taking the time to be here with us today and for all the amazing, great advice that you've had to share. So thank you so much for taking the time to making to this panel. Yeah, I guess that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you guys for organizing it. Great job.
Thanks.
Thank you for organizing this.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Bye.
Enjoy us, plus. Wacky session time.
Bye.
Thanks, Gilles.